Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Digital Transformation of Retail Brands, dealing with the impact of COVID-19, a webinar sponsored by Netsurion and hosted by Retail Customer Experience. Today's webinar will focus on the need for a secure, reliable, and scalable networking platform as retailers deploy new technologies in response to the coronavirus pandemic and to meet consumer expectations. I'm Judy Model, editor of Retail Customer Experience, and I'll introduce our speakers in a moment, but I want to remind everyone to stick around for the entire presentation because at the end you'll have the ability to submit a question in a live Q&A. So today, consumer behavior is dramatically changing in the wake of the ongoing COVID-19, and that is bringing operational change by retailers in response. But change and integration of new technology needs to be done right on a secure, reliable, and scalable networking platform. And that's our focus today. Our panel will discuss challenges faced by retail brands during this unprecedented time. They'll offer insight on what changes retailers can expect once the pandemic has ended, the threat of ransomware and costs associated with a breach, as well as costs related to network downtime events and how to prevent those events. Our speakers are Netsurion CIO Mark Cornwell, Mark Cline, Senior VP of Sales at Netsurion, and Anthony Miller, founder and CEO of Miller Media 7. Mark Cline has been working with restaurant businesses for over 15 years to shape network security and PCI DSS compliance strategies and deliver solutions that enable restaurants to innovate and grow their business while protecting their brand and customer data. Mark Cornwell brings more than 20 years of progressive cross-industry IT leadership to his role. He oversees the engineers at Netsurion, the ones who build, manage, and monitor the company's internal systems and technology. He previously served as CTO of Swiss Watch International, following management roles at AOL, Chico's FAS, and Winn-Dixie. Anthony also serves as creative director of Miller Media 7. It's a digital product agency that focuses on software, UX, UI, and digital strategy, and it is constantly leveraging new technology to further Miller Media 7's goals and mission. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark Cline.
Thank you, Judy, and thanks Retail Customer Experience for hosting. Also, thank you to Tony and Mark for being here. I know your schedules are busy, so appreciate you both joining us. So to frame up this webinar, we're going to focus on a few key areas of retail. And at retail, we're going to focus on traditional brick and mortar retailers. And we'll look at the current and future state of retail, how the current economy climate is affecting retail locations, and what companies are doing to avoid reducing storefronts or shutting their doors. We'll look through ideas on how to reduce IT spend and why connectivity is key. It's also a key component to the strategy, what to consider when evaluating network platforms and platform and new vendors. We'll also look review a major shift to e-commerce from traditional buying methods and sort of the trends we're seeing over the last couple of years and certainly recently in the last couple of months. And then we'll wrap up talking about data breach prevention, some of the recent ransomware attacks we've seen in the retail space, and wrap up with some details on the Netsurion Secure Edge networking and SIM, along with some questions at the end. So let's jump in discussing the sort of the current state of retail. A few years ago, I remember seeing a lot of articles around the death of retail. The stores were closing their doors, and because of Amazon and Walmart and others who were driving out traditional retail business models. But yeah, we would see more and more retail openings and growth. And now kind of fast forward to 2020, we're starting to see the same articles come out, but really now for a completely different reason. On our last webinar, we talked about how the restaurant industry was pivoting to off-premise ordering and how to optimize technology to drive revenue. And I think we're starting to see some of those same trends in retail. So Anthony, I want to start with you and what have you seen in the retail space really since COVID hit, and where do you see retailers pivoting over the next 3, 6, 12 months?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of retailers, what we've been seeing is they're trying to invest in their customers, their customer experience, and really drive those relationships. So one thing that is on the rise, and a lot of retailers have been implementing and prototyping ideas around, are like contactless delivery experiences or pickup experiences, and what do those look like, and what are those customer experience touch points throughout each phase of those. So that's one thing, how retailers are using technology to do that. I've also read reports like Walmart, for example, in the second quarter, they were very aggressive with how COVID was going to affect their storefronts. They invested $900 million in shoring up their in-store experiences to keep their workers safe, their customers safe. And when you do those sorts of things and you invest in the safety and the experiences of your customers, you're going to be able to drive revenue. Now, certainly not all retailers are in the driving seat that Walmart is and able to pony up that sort of money to shore up their stores. But we see other retailers that are smaller using the digital sort of footprints to drive those relationships.
Got it. Yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act, right? You're going to have to allocate some spend from the protection of your shoppers, but also your employees, right? And still focus on driving revenue. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Mark, Cornwell, I know you've spent many years in the retail space as a technology executive. I'll kind of flash back to your days in that space. Put yourself in a executive shoes at a retail brand today. What should they be focusing on? As Anthony mentioned, it's kind of a mixed bag, but if they had to pick one or two, is it customer experience? Is it the touchless experience for the customer? Is it the advertising that get shoppers in the door? Where should they be focusing efforts?
Well, it's interesting because I look back at 5 years ago and the direction that retailers were trying to go with omni-channel fulfillment type models, and they weren't necessarily gaining as much traction as they would have liked. The whole concept of buy online, pick up in store, using physical retail locations as essentially mini warehouses to provide fulfillment for online ordering. Now it's become less of a nice to have and more of a must have. So the foundation of the concept of being an integrated storefront that essentially can operate as a warehouse for distribution, for shipping to customers, or for contactless pickup and using third-party couriers to make deliveries. I think a lot of that trend is occurring, and some of the new things I believe that are becoming more more essential, or becoming essential for these operators, are alternative payment methods and contactless payment solutions. There's a significant move toward cloud-based point of sale systems that require an always-on connectivity at the location, public Wi-Fi, and the ability for consumers to come into the store and shop with a handheld device or their own personal device is critical. A lot more wireless technology is being deployed into the stores, so that the reliance on connectivity to the internet is far more important than it ever was before. So there, that trend that I think, I look back again 5 years ago where there was a big push toward digitizing the store, mostly around the customer experience as a nice to have and a way to attract customers. I think it's becoming very much, table stakes in terms of how customers expect to be able to interact with these retail locations. A lot of folks want to spend a lot less time in these locations, get in, get out, pick up what it is that they purchased online, maybe quickly browse, but have a pretty seamless, non-face-to-face checkout opportunity. think there are a lot of changes coming. I think more changes will come that as innovation continues to evolve, that will surprise us in the next 12 months.
Yep. Yeah, that's certainly the future state I think we're seeing. And, I start to see more Amazon lockers pop up in my area and some other new technologies when I'm out just walking around and shopping. But how do you prioritize, and I guess a question for you both, how do you prioritize those technologies, right? Are you focusing on the payment process, the touchless, or is it the buying experience? And we mentioned, shift to e-commerce, which we'll talk about here in a few seconds. But if you're a retailer, what do you focus on? If you had to pick one thing, what's the most important? Is it the shopping experience from the retail where they can buy it online, pick up in store, or is it that truly touchless payment system, or maybe it's a mixture of both? But Mark, what's your take? If you had to think 12 months from now, and let's say we're post this pandemic, hopefully, what should they be focusing on past this period of this hyper intensive technology growth? What will sustain, and where could they put their focus into?
Yeah, it's not really an easy answer because, retailers, if I were to look at, true specialty retail where you've got essentially a series of boutiques with maybe relatively specialized inventory for a specific demographic where they happen to be, I would say the in-store experience becomes paramount at that point, and being able to provide them with a safe shopping experience with the appropriate level of inventory available and the ability to get in and out, safely, if you will, I think would be key there. However, you look at some of the larger retailers where, kind of inventory availability and the ability to provide this distributed inventory management model, I think that for many retailers is critically important whenever they're dealing with housewares or things that typically are not fast fashion, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that depending on the type of retailer and the space that they're operating in, they may have a different set of needs. So I don't think it's an easy answer. I think touchless payments are ubiquitous. That's something that
Mm-hmm.
The contactless ability to make payments and look at alternative payment methods, whether it's accepting PayPal or mobile payments, other methods to get the transaction completed, I think are going to be across all retailers.
Got it. Tony, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I'm in alignment. There isn't a one size fits all for each retailer. They're going to have to look across their ecosystem and pinpoint opportunities for themselves. I know, when I spoke to a lot of people in early March and April, actually on the fashion side of things. And if this pandemic continues to swell during these winter months again, we can get a kind of a repeat in terms of possibly supply chain issues through China and even South Korea to the States that could also impact them. Hopefully that won't happen. But I think, getting back to that contactless sort of experience is going to be really paramount. I saw a study where through June, order for pickup volume rose like 202%. And 30% of those orders across the board were from new customers. But also you want to provide them a safe space within those stores. Customers are going to buy more in the stores versus digital first, but it's going to be a mixture of different strategies. A lot of these retailers really need to think about prototyping different ideas and testing those hypotheses, in real time, quickly, in an agile way, which most of them aren't really used to pivoting in a quick manner. So I think continuously innovating within organizations is going to be key moving forward.
Yep, agreed. One of the things we hear quite a bit on with our customers is, one, we're adding new technology, but two, how do I consolidate and and even reduce my spend in general IT and security as well. But you would think it would be the other way around. A lot of times it's not, right? The budgets are shrinking or whatever it may be. So how do I consolidate? How do I reduce my overall spend in these categories? Mark, I know working in retail space, I'm sure you have some unique ways and looking at overall IT spend, whether it's the network or network security or connectivity. What areas did you focus on at your time in those brands? Or was it point of sale? Was it connectivity from site to site? Was it order management? Any tips or tricks that you used over the years to help consolidate and drive that overall spend down?
We always focused, and I believe it was the right focus on ensuring that, where the shopper was, the opportunity to make that purchase was available to them. And everything in terms of spend was designed around that touch point of how to get the shopper either into the store or online, ensure that you had inventory availability, or you had the ability for an associate to interact with a customer so that they could facilitate a transaction. And the value proposition of what was being implemented in those stores, in our stores, was generally based on how likely we could improve that the likelihood of someone actually completing a transaction and walking out of the store with something, or ordering something and having it shipped home. So, whether it was clienteling applications or inventory management back office integrations, so that we had, real-time inventory feeds and trickle polling of sales data, so that we could ensure that our inventory position was constantly updated for e-commerce. All of those things together helped us, really try to create that omni-channel experience for the customer, so that when they were ready to buy, the product was available to either for them to pick up or for them to get shipped to their home.
Got it. Yeah, and one of the major trends we've seen is cloud-based point of sale technology to tie in the online buying, or I'm sorry, the in-person buying experience, but also in general how to purchase, how to shop within a retail environment, and just streamline that checkout process and reduce overall PCI requirements. So I think one of the big misconceptions we see in the marketplace is cloud-based providers that may include some sort of edge networking device for remote connectivity. The misconception is supplying a network firewall or even a failover device, right? Mark, I'll ask you first, kind of what's your take on the cloud-based point of sale offerings today, and how can retail brands be educated on what type of security features or connectivity features that may or not be included in these types of solutions?
Cloud-based POS is where things are going. Currently most point of sale systems have an offline mode that if the internet goes down, you can still facilitate a transaction. There are some limits to that, unfortunately, because obviously inventory can't get updated. You don't have access to maybe inventory that's not in your store if you don't have access to the cloud system. You're in a position potentially, if you have an integrated credit card processing system that's integrated to point of sale, if you don't have an internet connection, then you potentially have an issue with chargebacks, because you're storing and forwarding credit cards when you get the internet connectivity back. I think having some type of resiliency at the edge that provides that always-on connectivity to these cloud-based solutions is key. And when you look at outside of just the point of sale, which has a lot of features, a lot of these solutions are integrated with payroll and loss prevention and other solutions that require that constant reliable connectivity to the internet, whether it's AWS deployments or Azure deployments or some private hosted point of sale systems. The ability to maintain that connection and a reliable connection is critical. And as we move more toward online ordering and integration with e-commerce, it's key that these stores are always on. so that they can provide the service to the customer.
Got it. Anthony, what have you seen the last couple of years, and we'll take this year in particular, on IT spend, and then kind of a follow up, where do you see, 12 months from now, where that spend is, that maintaining, new technologies that have been brought on during the last 12 months to help with the rise of e-com and touchless, or where should retailers be focusing their budgets over the next couple of years?
Well, in our experience, a lot of retailers are dealing with problems like legacy systems and stuff like that. So I foresee them investing quite a bit into their overall architecture of their digital ecosystems, and how all of their customer experiences fit into that, shoring up their supply chain ecosystems, their analytics, their data in those points. So if I was going to bet on things, and things are kind of volatile right now, I wouldn't really do that. But my guess would be more heavily invested into those IT spends, infrastructure, and so forth.
Got it. Good. So let's talk about a topic Mark Cornwell just mentioned, which was kind of downtime. In conjunction with reducing overall spend and cloud-based applications, I think we should discuss redundancy or failover, backup, whatever you want to call it. The big question is, what happens when I lose my internet? Is probably a better way to phrase that. Mark, you mentioned it's important having some type of failover strategy in your retail environment. One for the cloud-based point of sale, but in general, just good practice. I think today, certainly today's client, the buyer doesn't want to use cash, and a touchless or credit card payment solution is almost a necessity at this point. And having that cloud-based point of sale offline for an hour or several hours can ruin a day in sales, right? When you're prioritizing, this type of solution, how high up on the totem pole does a failover solution matter, and is it almost mandatory at this point?
I think based on the way operations are today, it's an absolute must-have. Whether it's a redundant, wired connection, or some type of wireless LAN or LTE failover solution, or as 5G starts to materialize, the potential is there for that to be both a primary and potentially a failover solution. Virtually everything that is getting deployed in the next several years within these retail footprints is going to require some type of connectivity to the internet, whether that's digital signage, pulling content down from either a server or someplace in the cloud. If someone has implemented some sort of backup solution, that needs internet connectivity. If you're running endpoint security that has a report back into a SIM platform, you need an internet connection for that. Public Wi-Fi, you need internet connection for that. So the needs of that always-on connectivity is more critical now than ever. As sales are conducted in the store, you need that inventory movement to occur in whatever cloud-based inventory management system or back office systems that may be centralized for that retailer. That all requires some type of internet connectivity to work the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, in your consulting engagements with clients, how often does this topic come up? Is it viewed as a must-have in their eyes when they come to you for advice or consulting engagements? How often are you working with your clients on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's paramount. Like, it's how the connected world is working nowadays. I think we need to really pivot to this. And if you're not already set up or deployed for always on connectivity, then you're really going to be, you'd be damaging your brand, obviously sales and so forth. A lot more companies are experimenting with IoT products to captivate their customers even more, which also require a lot of sort of different connectivity as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's the way it's happening now. I mean, it's something that all businesses need to plan for and continue to support. The advent of 5G is gonna help this along as well. So yeah, this is the trend line that's been going on for the last few years.
Yeah. Mark, when you're looking at a failover strategy, what's a couple key topics to consider? Is it carrier hardware? Is it allocation of data? Is it visibility and alerting? Where do you focus on when you're looking to evaluate the service?
I mean, sequentially, I look for something that, particularly if I'm a retailer, I look at the systems that are actually going to protect my revenue. So first and foremost, I want to make sure my point of sale system has some type of failover option. And depending on the footprint of my location, having a primary connection that's a ADSL connection, a very slow connection, supports my point of sale, that may be enough. So if I can fail over to LTE, no harm, no foul. If I have larger operational considerations at a location, for example, where I need to operate, on failover, my public Wi-Fi, I've got a bunch of tablets, I've got inventory robots, I've got all this IoT that's deployed, a single failover option may not be sufficient for that location. I may need, redundant, wired high-speed connections with, multiple LTE failovers. So it really depends on the footprint that we're talking about. When I look at, specifically in the specialty retailer where you may have 3 or 4 registers and maybe some light technology, CCTV, and a few other things, I would prioritize for my, primary connection, having the whole store operational. And if I had some type of primary internet circuit problem, I would fail over, just the money-making systems, inventory management, point of sale, credit card processing, clienteling type applications. So I would be very specific about, what I would use that failover for, and in that scenario, considering that for most providers, LTE failover, cellular failover is still a metered connection. So to continue operations on a metered connection may not be the most cost-effective way to keep the operations running if you're pulling like your HD CCTV system for your LP across there at a couple gigs a day. It may not make sense to use LTE for that type of failover.
Yeah, it's all relative to the size and applications you're using, right? And a lot of times a hardline connection may not be an option, right? Too expensive or just not available. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk e-commerce for a few minutes. As you can see from the graph here, we've seen a tremendous spike in e-com activity since April. Anthony, I think we know the root cause of the spike, but the graph also shows e-com has been trending upward for the past several years. Why do you think this trend is increasing over the last several years? And do you think these higher numbers are here to stay long term?
Yeah, I think a lot more people just don't really have the time to go shopping to physical stores is one. A lot of families are both working and supporting their families here. So it's just an order of convenience, right? So if you're able to ship products quickly and check out your customers quickly, I mean, it's a driving indicator of what customers want, how their experience is. Speed is part of the experience. People don't talk about that enough. Speed is part of the experience. It's not all about the user interfaces. It's about the performance. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be a rising trend. And as companies roll out new emerging technologies to capture e-commerce, whether that's through augmented reality or virtual reality. It's just going to keep on pouring more fuel on that fire engine to bringing more customers through those different digital ecosystems. So yeah, it's going to keep on growing in my estimation.
Does that expansion add more complexity to the supply chain and or inventory? How do you plan for this, or does it even affect it?
I don't think I can really speak to the really hard intricacies of the supply chain problems. That's not really in our wheelhouse too much.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, kind of question for you both. I mean, what's next, right? With e-commerce and these new platforms from buying experiences, should we be expecting anything different in our holiday retail buying that's coming up in the next couple of years? What do you think's coming the next phase after we get through this e-commerce boom? Where do you see the shopping experience changing, or do you see the e-coms here to stay for the next couple of years? Let's start with Anthony.
Yeah, so as I alluded to earlier, there's just going to be more opportunities for e-commerce through new, different emerging technologies, VR, AR, and then increasingly mobile will be great tools for people to access products on the internet. So I think when you look at this holiday, especially this one, I'm not quite sure how much actual product is there, because I did allude to those supply chain problems that happened in the spring. How much actual product will be there for consumers to buy this year remains to be seen. And then also COVID with impacting the economy in terms of how consumers are spending. I read reports just recently that they're not looking to spend much for this holiday from all the reports that I've mentioned. So this holiday may be a down year for consumer spending across the board.
Got it. Mark, anything to add there? Any new technologies you think that we'll see this holiday season beyond?
I don't know that we're necessarily going to see new technologies. I think we're going to see, unexpected and non-traditional behavior from the consumers this year. When you think about this work from anywhere, work from home model, people are in front of the computers all day. They're probably doing some browsing, looking at product. The behavior is very different. In the past, you would actually have both, traffic to your website and foot traffic in the stores to kind of take a look at how, customers were behaving and interacting with your brand or with your location. Now you're really constrained in your visibility and what that customer's doing. And I think budgets and doubts, and I think the uncertainty coming out of the election. I think there are so many factors that make trying to prognosticate what's going to happen this holiday season has to be frustrating for virtually all main street retailers for sure. I think you look at Amazon, Walmart, some of the big really big players in the space. They've got hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars to throw at some of this stuff. The typical retailer, is not in a position right now, unfortunately, just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. They're going to have to place their bets very carefully and hope that the season, particularly this holiday season, comes out better. The days of Black Friday are gone, at least for this year. It's not like you're going to have these big crowds in the store. So how do you even find an alternative for that? How do you roll out your digital strategy for e-commerce to try to get, that revenue moving? I think there are a lot of challenges, a lot of, against the wind type activities that retailers are struggling with right now. And I think they really have to be careful about where they're placing their bets, because you can spend an awful lot of money and not get a heck of a lot of return on it.
Yeah. We've also seen, to kind of piggyback off that a lot more retailers are, they're investing in Amazon and Walmart from an ad buy sense. Like they're driving ad dollars there to help convert on product, which kind of seems like the beginning of the end. But if that's going to be the new normal moving through, then hopefully they can get some return on their investment there.
Yeah, and I have seen a lot of small retailers who were reluctant to use
Yes.
eBay and Amazon and these large and Walmart Marketplace as channels are having to bite their lip and just start selling their product on these other channels just to get eyes on their inventory.
Good stuff. So I'm going to shift to a couple of topics here, but sort of network and notably network security, and also choosing right vendors for adding new technology to a retail environment, whether it's consolidation, enhancement, or even cost reduction as a whole. Mark, what were some of the key focus areas? You mentioned, when you were working in retail, it was how do we grow revenue, and a lot of your technology and network ads were centered around that. Let's say you're building a network security, network connectivity program from scratch. Do you still focus on that one in today's climate, or is it more broad than that? Or where would you start if you had to give advice to someone who's trying to build out or even revamp a legacy product or network?
Yeah, things have changed a lot. When I look back, even less than 10 years ago, it was unusual to have anything more than maybe a pair of 24-port switches in even a relatively large retailer. Now you walk into even some of these smaller retailers with maybe relatively decent footprint, but not necessarily a large retailer, and they're running in the networking closet a bunch of hardware, most of it's networking equipment, and they've got half a dozen access points and Bluetooth beacons laid throughout the store, digital equipment in the dressing rooms, CCTV cameras throughout, IP cameras, multiple point of sale systems, tablets. There's so much technology in the store that the networking requirements, both intra-store, such as Wi-Fi and port density, and all those things are different than they were, several years ago. So making the right investment in the right technology in the in-store footprint is key. But then ensuring that all of that technology that's in the store has a reliable route to the internet, so that your IoT can communicate back to whatever IoT analytics you're providing. Your CCTV cameras can get to their cloud DVR where they're storing data and matching it up to POS information for loss prevention, and your cloud point of sale solution is working the way it should. So having that edge protected, both from a security perspective and a connectivity perspective, is important. And when we look back at security, it used to be, network segmentation and maybe some endpoint protection on your point of sale solution is all you needed, because that was the attack vector someone was trying to get to your credit cards. Now you've got social engineering and malware that could be introduced through, the email account everyone has, or links through a text message, or other things that create more entry points into the store network for malware and ransomware and other bad actors to get access to that store network that, quite frankly, didn't exist even 5 years ago.
Yep. Anthony, sort of similar question, but the technology ads and building that network from the ground up is important. The technology is certain, and the hardware is certainly important, but a lot of retailers rely on partners and managed services companies. What are a couple key questions to ask if you're a retailer and evaluating a new technology or vendor? Any key questions that you like to to provide your customers, to arm them on how to vet a new vendor for this type of service?
Yeah, I mean, there are a variety of ways that you can do this. So what we tend to do is, all this is really overwhelming for retailers, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many places where you could spend your energy, but what we like to tell them is like, let's focus on one problem and let's get a solution there and get small wins, really. Proof of concept, validate, and then deploy is probably the best way forward. When retailers are evaluating, how other vendors can perform this, is you really need to de-risk yourself, and going the prototype route is a great way to do that. A lot of vendors will go in there and they'll want to do everything under the sun, 2-3 year engagement, millions and millions of dollars. But if retailers don't know where to spend their money and get a positive ROI, you should prototype and just solve one problem at a time. You can certainly have a list of initiatives that you want to deliver, but I think starting with one that you can prototype and validate within the first 30 to 60 days is a smart way forward for a lot of retailers.
Got it. Yeah, small wins. Start small is good advice. I like that. So we've seen some trends over the last couple of years, and especially in the retail and restaurant space, as well as ransomware and malware, either found on a point of sale system or entire network. And Mark mentioned previously of phishing email, as simple as an email account phishing attempt. But I take company like Lord and Taylor had breached a couple of years ago. I think they just filed for bankruptcy in the last couple of weeks. But that event can be pretty crippling to the retail presence if you're not prepared to combat these type of attacks. Mark, we often talk about secure edge networking solutions and having a baseline firewall as a first line defense strategy, but really having that threat detection and response plan is usually secondary in the retail space. But I guess you could argue it's your highest risk of data breach. Second, maybe even being personnel within the organization. But I think the unknown is usually caused by a human error. But if you're building a security strategy today, how high would you rank a threat detection and response program? And are there any key areas you would focus on?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, most retailers were focused on the POS network. That was, and a lot of that was driven not necessarily by preventing some type of security event per se. A lot of it was around compliance, because there was such a potential impact of the not being PCI DSS compliant and having issues with accepting credit cards. And so there was a lot of this this drive to focus on compliance. And I believe to a certain extent we were all conditioned in retail to focus more on that, and not necessarily as much on these other places where, quite frankly, the amount of harm that could be done was in many cases significantly higher. And then these other vectors. And now that you've got a lot of endpoints, the ability to protect those endpoints through some type of multi-layered approach. Firewall is going to give you the edge protection. But when you go back into that retailer's footprint, there's a back office computer, there are multiple point of sale terminals, there are point of sale server, there are IoT devices, there are tablets, there are kiosks that are throughout these locations. All of those have some type of operating system. All of them have access to the internet. And in many cases, they have the ability to browse the web, click on something nefarious, download it to a local machine. And whether that's some type of DNS exploitation or some type of command and control connectivity that gets someone access to that network. There are a lot of things that could happen in the store network that, quite frankly, were not even likely several years ago. So having a multi-layered approach with endpoint detection and response, with an edge firewall. There are just a lot more security requirements to take into account in these locations now.
Got it. How important is it to have a a managed SOC or even a eyes on glass option, right? A lot of the retail environments we work with are usually self-managed, from a couple, 2 to 3, 5, 10 IT team, depending on the size of brand. A lot of times you have turnover, you have, just issues from vendor to vendor, swapping out solutions every couple of years. How important is to have that either manage or even co-manage SOC for your endpoint protection? Is that sort of the norm today, or do you still see more and more brands kind of taking that on themselves?
I think it's a very difficult thing to take on as a retailer, because it's not necessarily a core competency. So unless you've got this big corporate entity that has kind of the resources to put together a true security operations center that's staffed 24/7, it's just not practical. And quite frankly, the staff required to monitor and manage those security operations centers are not inexpensive. It's highly unlikely that particularly a small retailer is going to be able to make that investment. So going out to a third party or a hosting managed service provider seems like it should be a logical step that someone should evaluate if they're serious about their security posture in their retail locations, as well as their corporate offices.
Yeah, good. If there was a start somewhere approach, is it focusing on the point of sale first and then expanding out the other endpoints, or where would you focus efforts for that?
I think initially the point of sale, again, because of PCI compliance, you've got some of the basics there, but a lot of it's focused on file integrity monitoring, not necessarily true endpoint protection, detection, and response. So I think maybe some evolution from the current thinking around changed monitoring of what's happening in the POS to true predictive detection and monitoring of those endpoints is key. And then back office computers, where you're managing your payroll, your books for your operation, your inventory, maybe some other personnel type files or things that quite frankly may be beneficial for someone to access. I think those are often overlooked in the retail footprint, and something beyond just antivirus I think is key, because the attacks have become far more sophisticated. They're coming in from multiple different vectors, whether it's email, attached embedded links, text messages, or even posts on social media now can contain malware that looks innocuous, but you click it and you're infected.
Yep.
Mark, what do you think about comprehensive customer profiles?
I'm not understanding the specifics of the question. When you say
verifying customer identity within those sort of ordering functions, so that that you kind of protecting against digital identity fraud, for example. Because of
the generally, if someone's setting up an account or they're doing some verification, either the credit card's valid or there's some other information about the customer that you can validate. I think the onerous aspect of trying to insist that a customer get validated some other way beyond that would be potentially onerous on the customer part.
Right.
Yep. So to wrap up, okay, Mark, sorry.
As well, I think there may be some types of retail where customer verification, meaning true authentication and verification of a customer, may be important in that type of business, that type of operation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to wrap up, I think we want to mention a little bit on the Netsurion branch SDO and event tracker sim offerings. We work with several retail brands to build a network security strategy to easily deploy secure edge networking with built-in Wi-Fi, cellular failover, coupled with a PCI compliance portal solution that integrates into our event tracker sim and managed SOC. We're making it really easy to evaluate and consolidate multiple technologies into one security partner, focus on network security and simplifying your network stack. We're also offering a free networking savings calculator, the link shown. You can use it to calculate your current networking strategy for security and compare it against some of our top clients who are saving thousands a year with the Netsurion solutions. We also offer a SIM solution advisor where you can consult with one of our SIM engineers to map out a cost reduction strategy for your SIM and SOC needs. You can also check out Tony and his team at millermedia7.com for any information they have there. And Mark, Tony, want to thank you guys for joining with us today. And Judy, we'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Hey, thanks for a great presentation, guys. So I'm going to lead off our live Q&A. We invite our listeners to use the chat window, submit some questions, and we already have a few in the queue. So our first question, are routers with failover LTE and power backup available? Are there other key communication nodes with similar redundancies?
I can jump in and answer this. There absolutely are, some LTE failover devices that are either PoE powered or include or can include some type of redundant power supply. Depends on how high end you want to get on the type of deployment that you have. We do recommend that any retailer that's running a technology stack in their location should have a redundant power supply and the ability in the event of a power loss to be able to maintain the systems operating at least for a period of time. So generally speaking, you're going to see probably the same amount of redundancy or backup power on an edge device that you would on a typical networking piece of equipment.
Okay. Our next question is, do you think proximity marketing platforms and devices are useful for brands to increase sales? Do you think LATAM, and that's LATAM, is prepared for this type of action?
I think that one's for you, Mark.
Yeah, LATAM. Oh, you're talking about Latin America.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, when you think about proximity marketing, there are two different ways to look at it. If you happen to be driving by a location and you have some sort of nexus to a specific retailer or a specific business, you can either receive text alerts or some type of in-application notification that, hey, we've got a sale, or maybe they'll send you a promotion. I think historically, when there was a lot of foot traffic to those locations, when you're walking around a mall and other things, I think they were extremely effective. I would be a little concerned in today's day and age, particularly in the U.S. as it relates to COVID-19, that I don't believe they're as useful as they used to be. That's not to say that they won't be, in the future. And to me, whether or not it's available in a specific market, I don't know the specific consumer behavior and how they may react differently. But logically, if done properly and someone has the ability to push a notification and some type of application or a text message that someone's within a reasonable distance of a location where they can step in and take advantage of that offer, logically it would make some sense that would apply virtually anywhere.
Okay. Next question, will mesh networking provide more security and robust connectivity?
So mesh networking from a connectivity standpoint, allows you to expand a wireless network relatively easily and extend a network beyond kind of the normal capability. It does require additional hardware. It does work quite well. And depending on the solution you deploy, there are some vendors out there that provide more integrated solutions, even web filtering, content filtering, and in some cases even some type of firewall that could run on the actual hardware. So it really depends on the vendor that you're working with that is providing that mesh solution.
Okay. Next question. What do retail businesses need to do to fix rush technology integration that affect performance and security?
So I'll jump in here because, having been in the space, there's always someone out, particularly on the customer facing side that's a little bit ahead of their skis in terms of the operational ability to implement some type of new technology in the retail footprint. And I think Anthony had mentioned, POCs and trial and error. I think the rushing something to a retail outlet without some type of POC and pilot and the ability to really learn, test and learn the solution is fraught with some significant, cost and potential customer aversion type issues if not done properly. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
All righty, and as we're getting close to closing time, we have one more question. We hear the term UX thrown out. Oh, hold on, I lost my place. I'm so sorry. Okay.
That's Tony. Can you give us a little more insight into what?
Oh, yeah. No, I got it. We hear the term UX thrown out there. Tony, can you give us a little more insight into what the term refers to and maybe an example or two?
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of people just think UX is, how pretty a website looks, but it's really not. It's about how your customers or stakeholders interact with every sort of digital and even physical experience that they come through. So I think, a lot of people don't know that there's a significant amount of research and stakeholder interviews and testing that goes into this. And that's really where you get to understand your customers, how your customers' behavior is worked into every sort of product that they touch of your brand, whether it's physical in-store experience or a digital touch point experience through applications, screens, etc. So a lot of it is understanding your users' behaviors, what drives your users, how are you priming your users to make decisions that give value. Yeah, so I think that UX and almost like UX and CX, customer experience, really go hand in hand, and they're both cut from the same cloth. So yeah, it's more than just a pretty engaging website. It's how your customers interact with every facet of your brand.
Well, on that insightful insight, we're going to conclude our webinar. I'd like to thank Mark, and Anthony, and Netsurion for a great presentation. Keep an eye on your inbox for an email with a link to the on-demand version of the webinar so you can download it for future reference and, of course, share. So I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.